Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Cordula Burke, and on this channel you'll find the best tips on cybersecurity and what you can do to stay safe online, and of course to keep your laptop safe as well. And in today's video we're going to talk about the 5 myths surrounding cybersecurity. These myths affect both individuals and businesses alike. At its core, it's really about the fact that far too many people rely solely on antivirus protection. That's myth number 1. I already mentioned it in the last video. Many people think, oh well, Windows Defender is running in the background, or I have Bitdefender Premium and the Elite version installed. We don't have to worry about anything anymore. Everything's running smoothly, it's all good. And then they just stop thinking about what they're actually doing online, whether it's visiting websites or opening email attachments, whatever it may be. A modern antivirus can't detect everything. It can't detect new viruses and Trojans. It's very important not to rely solely on this antivirus protection, but to see it simply as a tool. As a tool that supports you and checks the databases to see, okay, I already know this virus, I can warn about it, and for everything else, you really have to train your eyes to say, okay, I think this could actually be a scam email, this could be phishing, I'd better not open this attachment. That's actually the most widespread myth in the world. And just recently, I came out of a head-shaking moment again. The kind of nonsense some people spread on YouTube, sorry for putting it that way, like saying you should install Windows Defender on your Android phone. No, under no circumstances do you need antivirus protection for your Android phone or Android tablet, and certainly not Windows Defender. It makes sense if you have Windows Defender, for example, on a Surface tablet, then of course it's included anyway. But Android doesn't necessarily need antivirus protection, and certainly not those expensive subscriptions from Kaspersky, Mac, iPhone, or whatever they're called. This myth is still very widespread, especially because the big manufacturers advertise it saying, you already have our antivirus key on your computer, so it would make sense to have it on your phone as well. No, that's absolutely not necessary. And then there's something that always shocks me. This thing with password managers. Now that I have a password manager, I don't even need to come up with a serious password anymore, a master password, and for the rest of my logins, I'll just use house12345 again. And I know I'm also one of those people who tend to have a bit of a weak spot there. Not necessarily house 12,345 or last summer, but I think that risk exists for everyone. That you just say, okay, I have one password and I just change the last 2 digits or 2 numbers, whatever, and I use that for multiple logins. Because it's just super convenient and it's easier for your brain to remember. And I'll put it this way, for online women, that's absolutely not a problem. But still, of course, these passwords are not secure. And that's exactly what password managers are primarily for, so that you don't have to remember any passwords anymore. That's why there's LastPass, which is also called country password in German, so that you can have these passwords generated automatically and ideally use 15 to 20 characters. And yes, this master password has to be super secure. That's the absolute key for the vault, for the digital vault in this case. And that's why it makes sense, according to a tip from a hacker, to use a sentence here that you can remember, not the sentence word for word, but something that gives you a mnemonic device. And hackers will have a relatively hard time cracking this sentence. That's better than just using a single word with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the end. Or of course, some people use things like my darling and so on. That's absolutely an insecure password. And you shouldn't use insecure passwords. But the myth that password managers take care of everything and that password managers are absolutely unhackable, that's something you can probably cross off the list. That's not the case. Then, according to my cheat sheet here, nothing can happen to my WordPress website. Yes, I used to think that too. If I had these plugins installed like iThemes, WP Security, and all the others, which I also recommended to my clients, then everything would be fine and nothing could go wrong. I don't do that anymore today. Yes, a WordPress website can be hacked, but honestly, if you use the latest WordPress version, regularly update your plugins, keep your theme up to date, make sure the latest PHP version is installed, and use SSL encryption, then I would say there's actually relatively little that can go wrong. And you're not really on the safe side with those because these plugins themselves can actually create security vulnerabilities. And on top of that, it's happened to me many times that I've locked myself out with iOS and iSIM security. Or is it actually worse afterwards than it was before? Or has it actually happened to me with... Two-factor authentication is also used with password managers. That's why I'm not a fan of it. It's also a kind of myth that everything becomes better and more secure because of it. That's not true. Of course, it is an extra layer of protection because you have to confirm the login again and usually receive a code and so on. But it's not absolutely necessary. As I said, it's an additional layer of protection. Then there's the idea that the cloud is absolutely secure and unhackable. I used to think too that I could just store all my data in the cloud on Probox or Google Drive and that would be fine. For a while, I also decided to use Dressurit, thinking everything was safe, it's in Switzerland, I don't have to worry anymore, never again a USB stick burning out and so on. But in the back of my mind, I still had this feeling that maybe the cloud isn't actually that secure. Where are the data even stored? Where are they hosted? And do I even have access to them? And yes, I just didn't have a good feeling about it, or at least I didn't have a good feeling in the back of my mind. And that's why it's actually true. A cloud can in fact be hacked. And I think it even happened to me that this cloud was hacked because some photos showed up on certain websites. That's just my assumption though. But as I said, a cloud can be hacked just like a regular website. And of course, it's also important to know which personal and intimate data I'm uploading to the cloud and which business data I'm uploading to the cloud. Who has access to the files? Who has access to the business data? Who has access to the cloud at all? And I need to be clear about the security risks of a cloud. Whether it's Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive, it doesn't matter at all. That's a different matter altogether. This is less relevant for my target audience in the USA, but when it comes to data protection, it's still important in Europe. And many people also say that data protection is important to them, but transparency in general is important worldwide. That okay, where is this data stored? How reliable is the cloud provider? In this case, Dropbox or Google. Of course, they have the ability to store this data indefinitely. These companies will probably be around for quite a long time, maybe even longer than your own lifetime, I would say. If a new provider comes along, someone you don't know, and they offer a cloud service, of course you think twice. Good price, but I don't really know them, so should I? And naturally, you tend to trust what's been online for longer. So the conclusion is the cloud isn't 100% secure, but it has definitely become much safer than it was 10 years ago. And my recommendation here is to use a hyper-bright storage approach. That means storing data on a USB stick or even on those huge hard drives that are available now, or maybe even hosting your own cloud. And of course, also using an external hard drive. And there are so many storage options available. Even Blu-ray would theoretically still be recommended for certain things, I would say. So that's everything on the topic of the cloud. And then I have here what I believe to be myth number 5, a truly significant point to consider. Yes, in general, this actually kind of goes together. Many small or medium-sized businesses think, I'll never get hacked anyway. What could possibly happen to us? And hackers would never target us. By the way, private individuals think the same way. I include myself in that as well, because you think, oh, well, what could possibly happen to me with my laptop? There's nothing on it anyway. And to some extent, that's true. You can think of it like this. If someone has an elegant estate or house, then burglars, I'm talking now, not digitally, but in real life, would say, wow, it's worth breaking in there. There must be something to get. There's a lot of money. Let's come up with a plan. So if someone lives in the city in a very simple apartment with a very basic front door, then people, in this case, the burglars, think that's rather difficult, right in the middle of the city, and well, it doesn't look particularly interesting. They'd rather have a big estate to break into where it's actually worth it, where there's something to get. And online, hackers act in exactly the same way. Of course, they consider whether the person might have private crypto vaults, like in that LastPass hack, what else the person does, why it would be interesting to hack them. You kind of need to know a bit about the person. So just hacking someone like Marcus Möller, for example, someone you don't know, who isn't in public life, who isn't a celebrity and so on, and apologies to any Marcus Möllers who are celebrities, that was just an example. So just a person you don't know who isn't in public life and maybe isn't involved in politics either. Someone who's just sitting in their home office doing something, a hacker would naturally say, well, that's not really worth it. But if it's a well-known politician, or like when the Bundestag was hacked here in 2017, then of course hackers are interested in that. And with small and medium-sized businesses, it's also the case that hackers say, of course, that's lucrative, there's something to gain there. There are customer data, there's probably also money, so it's worth the effort. So of course, it's definitely the case that Small and medium-sized businesses are lucrative targets, and that brings us to the last point. Many think they can save money on IT, that they don't need an IT officer or a cybersecurity consultant, and they don't want to have anything to do with the topic at all. Everything just runs on the side, maybe even just handled by the intern in the worst case, and that's obviously very bad. I know this especially from European companies, so for example in Germany and the UK, that it's actually very difficult here. And many companies are still working with outdated things, including fax machines. I can't say for sure how it is in the UK right now, but I do know that in Germany, many companies actually only use fax machines. This is not a joke. And in fact, some even still work exclusively with Windows 7 and Windows 10. And this myth, or rather this problem, well, it's not really a myth. I'm safe if I use Windows. Well, that's complete nonsense. With outdated Windows versions, updates are always necessary. And in general, you should always make sure to install them, to use the latest Windows version, to patch it, and to apply these updates promptly. Well, that actually brings us to the end. That was just an extra tip about security updates. I can do those later. You absolutely cannot do them later, because especially with Windows, these updates are now forced on me with this HP laptop. Honestly, I'm not a fan of that. But on the other hand, it's obviously very useful when these Windows updates are installed automatically, and also when WordPress updates are installed automatically, because that way security vulnerabilities are avoided and you always stay up to date. And that's something you should really pay attention to. Those were the 5 biggest security myths. The word myth already says it all. It's simply a myth and you end up going down the wrong path, so to speak. And here it's really important to keep learning and training yourself and to develop an eye for what's actually a real email, what's a phishing email, and how you can find out whether your computer has been hacked or not. These are all things you need to check. Thank you very much for your attention and see you in the next video.